Hey there, it's November 7th already. Can you believe it? Feels like just yesterday we were glued to our screens watching the election results roll in. By the way, how about this weather in New York City? It's been weirdly warm ever since, election day. It's almost like the city itself is in shock. And speaking of things finally snapping back to normal, did you hear that Mount Fuji in Japan finally got its first snowfall? They were starting to get really worried about the lack of snow this year.
It's amazing how these little natural events can feel so symbolic, isn't it? Like the world's taking a deep breath after
Oh, yeah.
holding it for too long.
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of deep breaths, maybe bracing ourselves. We need to dive into the main event. Trump's back in the White House, and the world is, well, reacting. We got a stack of sources to unpack today. Newsweek, the Guardian Times of Israel, and a bunch of online news outlets, all trying to make sense of what a second Trump term means for global policy. And honestly, some of it's pretty surprising.
It is, especially when you start looking at the specific reactions from different groups. For example, we've got Hamas, the Palestinian militant group, often at odds with Israel, publicly calling for an end to the ongoing war. But here's the kicker. They're saying Trump's the key to making it happen.
Wait, seriously? Hamas is looking to Trump, too. Pressure Israel into peace. That's not the dynamic I would expect it.
Right. It seems counterintuitive, given Trump's close relationship with Netanyahu during his first term. But if you dig into Hamas's reasoning, it gets really interesting. They're not just banking on some kind of personal friendship angle. They're actually anticipating specific policy shifts. They believe a less interventionist U.S. approach is more likely under Trump, which could open the door for them to achieve their goal of an independent Palestinian state.
So less U.S. involvement overall.
Yeah.
And maybe less automatic support for Israel compared to the previous administration. But doesn't that contradict Trump's past actions? He moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, which is a huge win for Netanyahu.
Absolutely. And that's where the cracks in the Trump-Netanyahu relationship become important. Yes, they were initially very close. But if you look at the reporting in Newsweek, you'll see there's been growing tension, especially over Netanyahu's handling of this current war with Hamas. Trump has openly criticized Netanyahu's leadership and has called for a swift end to the conflict.
So Hamas sees that friction and thinks, hey, maybe Trump will push Netanyahu harder this time around.
Exactly. They're looking for any sign that Trump's foreign policy in the region might actually be different this time.
And what about Netanyahu himself? How's he reacting to all of this? I mean, he did congratulate Trump on the win, right?
He did, but the Times of Israel piece we have analyzes his congratulatory message. And it's all very carefully worded diplomatic language. He emphasizes the historic return and the great alliance between Israel and America. But you can almost hear the underlying tension, like he's trying to reassert that relationship, despite the recent disagreements.
So we've got Hamas banking on a shift in U.S. policy, Netanyahu trying to smooth things over. This is already way more complex than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on how all this is playing out for the Palestinians on the ground.
Right. And that's where the Guardian's reporting adds another crucial layer. They've been talking to Palestinians in the West Bank, and the overall feeling is one of deep disillusionment. They've seen decades of conflict with little progress toward a peaceful solution, and many feel that the West consistently prioritizes Israel's interests over theirs. And it's not just a feeling. There's a real risk that their situation could actually worsen under a second Trump administration. The Guardian article highlights concerns that Trump might embolden the Israeli right, potentially leading to further annexation of the West Bank. That's where Israel takes control of Palestinian territory and applies Israeli law there.
Okay, so that's huge. And on top of that, they're worried about the UN relief agency, UNRWA, which provides essential aid to Palestinians. The article suggests Trump could weaken that support, too.
Exactly. It's a combination of what Trump has said and done in the past, plus this general uncertainty about what his foreign policy will actually look like this time around.
And speaking of uncertainty, there's this one quote from a Palestinian in The Guardian that really stuck with me. They describe the situation as a monkey holding a bomb. You don't know when he will throw it or where he will throw it. It's such a powerful image that really captures the anxiety and fear people are feeling.
It does, doesn't it? And it highlights the potential for things to escalate quickly and unpredictably. We've seen Trump's willingness to use military force and disregard international norms of the past. Think back to his decision to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal, or the assassination of Iranian General Soleimani. Those actions have left many world leaders concerned about what a second Trump term could mean for global stability.
It's like everyone's holding their breath, wondering what he'll do next. And it's not just the Middle East that's on edge. The article in Newsweek suggests that Trump's win could usher in a new era of isolationism for the U.S., which could have ripple effects across the globe.
That's a key point to consider. If the U.S. steps back from its role as a global leader, it creates a vacuum that other countries, some of whom may not share our values or interests, will rush to fill. This could lead to a more fragmented and unstable world order, making it much harder to address pressing global challenges like climate change or future pandemics.
It's almost like we're at a crossroads. Trump campaigned on an America First platform, but will that translate into a more isolationist approach on the world stage? And if so, what does that mean for international cooperation and global security?
Those are the million-dollar questions, aren't they? And unfortunately, we don't have crystal balls to tell us the answers.
We don't. But what we do have is a better understanding of the complex web of factors at play here. We've got Hamas seeing an opportunity in Trump's victory, Netanyahu trying to navigate a changing relationship, and Palestinians feeling increasingly marginalized and uncertain about their future.
Exactly. And all of this is happening against the backdrop of Trump's unpredictable foreign policy approach, which has both worried and emboldened different actors on the world stage.
So what does this all mean for the average person listening to this deep dive? Why should they care about these global power shifts and potential policy changes?
Because ultimately, these shifts have the potential to impact all of our lives. A more unstable world means greater risks of conflict, economic disruption, and even humanitarian crises.
It also raises questions about America's role in the world. Will we continue to be a leading force for democracy and human rights? Or will we retreat inward, focusing solely on our own interests and leaving a void for others to fill? It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. And it feels like we're just scratching the surface of what a second Trump term could mean for the world.
We are. But I think what we've uncovered in this deep dive is that complexity itself is the biggest takeaway. There are so many competing interests, historical tensions, and unpredictable personalities involved that it's impossible to predict with any certainty what will happen next.
You're right. It's tempting to try to simplify things, to look for easy answers or clear-cut predictions. But the reality is, the global landscape is messy, and Trump's return to the White House just adds another layer of unpredictability.
And that unpredictability is precisely what makes the situation so fascinating and, frankly, a little unnerving. It challenges us to think critically, to avoid falling into simplistic narratives, and to consider the potential consequences of different scenarios.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you hope our listener walks away thinking about?
I hope they walk away with a sense of informed curiosity. We've explored some of the key players and potential flashpoints, but the story is far from over. I encourage our listener to stay engaged, to keep questioning, and to seek out diverse perspectives as events continue to unfold.
I love that, informed curiosity. It's not about having all the answers. It's about staying engaged and being open to learning more.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe in a few months or a year, we'll revisit this topic and see how things have evolved.
That's a great idea. We could do a follow-up deep dive and see if any of our initial assumptions were right, or if Trump has completely thrown us a curveball.
Either way, it's bound to be an interesting ride.
Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the global implications of Trump's second term. It's been a thought-provoking conversation, and I hope our listener feels a little more equipped to navigate the complexities of this new era.
I hope so too. And to our listener, remember to stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged. The world needs your voice and your perspective.